Thank you for joining VIP's webinar, Gutenberg for Enterprise. At VIP, we're really excited about the Gutenberg project. It's brought unprecedented agility to enterprise WordPress. We're already seeing our clients come up with blocks that allow enterprises to integrate branding and to achieve custom functionality right in the Wordpress editor. So we wanted to show you off some capabilities of the block editor, and we invited our featured partner, Big Byte, to share some of their work with you. So I'm going to hand over to Johnny, Big Byte's head of design, and he can take it from here. Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks. As Tess says, I'm Johnny, head of design at Big Byte. We're a WordPress VIP partner, which means we're lucky enough to partner with some great clients with WordPress, such as clients like Amnesty International, HSBC, Octopus Group, and News Corp, which we're going to be showing some work from today. So first, I'm just going to run through a few slides, just talking about Gutenberg, how we approach it, and then I'm going to show a couple of demonstrations of some sites that we're currently working on at the minute. The first is going to be quite layout heavy, talking about how we approach Gutenberg blocks and how we might go about building a page. And then second, we're going to focus more on using Gutenberg to improve editorial efficiency. With that, we're going to show some work that we're doing with News Corp at the minute. We are planning on having a little Q&A session at the end, but I should probably say up front, this isn't going to be an overly technical call or a webinar, sorry. But if you do have some technical questions, we can do our best to answer them. Also, we've got the chat window in Zoom. If you did want to put in some questions in there, we've got Scott on hand as well, who might be able to answer some questions as we're going along. So I'm going to jump into a slide presentation now. So hopefully everyone can see that. So like I say, along with WordPress, we work with some great clients, as mentioned before, Amnesty International, News Corp, and Octopus Group, who've been kind enough to let us show some of the work that we're working on with them at the minute as well. So I'm not 100% sure what everyone's knowledge is coming into this of Gutenberg, so I'm just going to give a quick overview of Gutenberg. Gutenberg obviously is the name given to the new WordPress editor. It was officially launched December 2018 last year, so it's still relatively new software. It was designed really to help create modern media-rich pages and posts. At Big Byte as an agency, we've been a pretty early adopter of the software, and we've used it in a few different ways to varying degrees of success. The reason I want to show some projects that are work in progress rather than live projects that we've done in the past is the more we use it, the more we improve our own process, constantly looking for improvements and evolving the way we use the software and solutions we offer to our clients. Also, the platform itself is constantly evolving with new features being announced all the time. 5.3, WordPress 5.3 was released just last week. We can touch on that a little bit later as well. So in simple terms, the Gutenberg editor is made up of different components that we call blocks. Blocks can range from simple elements, such as the title of a page, a paragraph, or a button, all the way to more complex components like you might find on more feature-rich websites like a gallery or a dynamic newsfeed, for example. So you can see a little GIF on the screen there. All we're doing there is adding in a cover image, which has a couple of blocks predefined within that. So we can set a background image, and then we've got an input there to add a heading in. So you can see a really quick example of how you could start pulling together a layout. So a good example of an early piece of work that we did with the Gutenberg editor was for our client Amnesty International. I'm sure most people are aware of what Amnesty do, but just in case, they are a worldwide organization, human rights organization, and they operate in about 150 different countries across the world. So obviously that means they have a lot of different websites, they have a lot of microsites, landing pages, and they're all loosely based on the same brand identity, but they didn't all quite sit together as a cohesive brand. So what we did is we worked with them to create a reusable framework, and that included about 25 different custom blocks, which means they can now internally build a website or a landing page or a microsite without our involvement. They would only really ever now come to us for new custom blocks. We could develop that and then ship that back into the core framework. So you can see the screenshot there. We've got the Gutenberg editor on the left and the front end of the website on the right. And there what we're doing is we're just adding a header in to like a section banner. And you can see that it quite closely mirrors on the Gutenberg editor what is shown on the front end. So this was one of the first major organizations to adopt Gutenberg. It is a really good use case. Not only really have they massively sped up the process of building a website, but now crucially all the sites are using that same framework and they have a consistent look and feel. So that brings me on to talking about design systems. Design systems, as we probably know, are quite a hot topic at the minute, with a lot of enterprise businesses exploring developing a design system internally if they are looking at building out a website or a product at scale. It's something we've been tackling with our clients, looking at ways that we can implement a design system in Gutenberg. So people are probably familiar with more commonplace design systems like Google's Material Design or Microsoft's Fluent, for example. But you probably know more and more enterprise companies like Uber, Airbnb, Shopify, they're all developing their own design systems, and they're all striving for the same goal, which is essentially having a set of reusable standards and components that change the pace of creation within their organization. So I've got this quote here from InVision, which says, "A design system is a collection of reusable components guided by clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications." So I thought that pretty accurately and succinctly describes what a design system is. But actually, if you were to switch out the first three words of that quote, it could also pretty easily describe what the goal of Gutenberg is they both follow pretty much the same principles. Gutenberg, as that says, is a collection of reusable components that are assembled together to build an application or a product or a website. And like I say, they all kind of strive for the same goal, and they all adhere to the same principles, which are efficiency. So instead of repeatedly building similar components from scratch, Gutenberg allows us to reuse components and thereby increase efficiency in building a website or a product. Consistency. They both use a set of principles and rules to build components like typography, colors, padding, and we're able to integrate these rules into Gutenberg, so it becomes much easier for a site editor or a content creator to create a consistent experience across different platforms. And the final one's scale. Increasing efficiency and consistency, as we've looked at, leads someone using WordPress to be able to build faster and at scale. Like I mentioned with the Amnesty International project, they're able to build a website now within a week that fits into their design system. So, as I said, I'm going to show some demonstrations of a project that we're currently working on. And this is a project that we're working on with one of our current clients called Octopus Group. And they have let us show some screenshots of their design system and the current work in progress build of their website. And essentially they were trying to tackle the same problem that we were with Amnesty International. So Octopus Group have a number of companies and they wanted to bring them all together under a cohesive brand identity. So they developed a design system. You can see some screenshots from that today. So we've touched earlier on a Gutenberg block can be anything really from single-use components like typography or headings. So we can see the typographic scale being set here and defined in the top left. We can see the different type of buttons that are defined also. Or a block can be more complex components like a hero, for example, which is in the bottom left. So you can see a hero is actually a group of components that are grouped together. So we've got a background image, we've got a heading, paragraph, and then a couple of buttons as well. So you can start to see how you could group some of these together, define these elements in a Gutenberg environment, and start to build out a site. So just before we jump into the Gutenberg editor, I just want to touch on really 4 ways that we approach working with Gutenberg blocks and developing Gutenberg blocks. So the first one being working with the default Gutenberg blocks. So if you went away and installed, say, WordPress 5.3, you'll get a collection of Gutenberg blocks that we can call base blocks. So they're, like I said, there might be components like paragraphs, headings, images, lists. And what we're essentially going to be doing is taking those components and styling them accordingly with the rules that are defined in a particular design system. So we could build out a simple banner like this with a heading and a paragraph, and it will inherit the predefined styles. The 2 seconds. The second one would be extending default blocks to enhance functionality and experience. So this might be things like buttons or columns, where we could take the default button, the Gutenberg blocks, and enhance them to add additional functionality. So we can see there we've got a slightly more complex layout where we would define that as a 2-column layout. So we've built a column builder that have set ratios that we can have 2 different types of content side by side, and those the rules of the grid, the padding, and the margins are all defined within Gutenberg. And then the third one is creating completely custom blocks with bespoke functionality. So that is when you might have a block with very specific requirements that isn't something that kind of comes with Gutenberg out of the box, sorry. So you might need to, dig into the React code base and then build something up yourself. Like, for instance, something like a dynamic news feed or the hero that we saw earlier on. And then the fourth one we're going to touch on later is advanced block development, where we're going to get into some of the News Corp examples, like I've mentioned before. So I'm going to jump into the WordPress editor now. I hope one of the big takeaways that you can see from the WordPress editor is it's quite minimal. So there isn't a lot of custom, in the past, like WordPress could be full of custom fields and things like that, whereas this experience is quite minimal. So it really just focuses in on the content that you're creating on the page. And obviously Gutenberg is inherently a visual experience to put together a site. So you'll see as we're building it up, the back end of this closely mirrors what it's actually going to look like on the front end. So what I'm going to do is just start adding some blocks. There's a couple of different ways we can add blocks. I'm sure people have probably used Gutenberg already, but you can see that we can add blocks from here or in the top left, or we can even use slash commands. So as we go through this demo, I'll probably start using slash commands more, just because it's more natural for me to be able to do that. So I'm going to start by putting in a section. So we use sections really to group a collection of components together. That means we can apply a layout structure to that, and a grid structure as well. So that might be something that is defined within the design system. So everything inside adheres to the rules within that container. And it also obviously helps us to output nice semantic HTML on the front end. So within this section, I'm going to add in a heading. And you can see we've got a couple of different options. We can change the typographic scale. We can change the alignment here. So again, this is just using the base blocks that would come with any WordPress install. So we'll add in a paragraph. And again, we can change the alignment. And you can see that the styles of the heading and the paragraph that we put in are what was defined in the rules that we put into the Gutenberg. So if we preview that on the front end, you can see there that the paragraph that we've put in kind of sits within the container. So you can see that it's in the wrapper of the page. And you can see that we've also kind of pre-put in the header and the footer into the page. I'm not going to touch too much on the navigation elements because they, at the minute, are still set within the core WordPress menu system. There is talk, I think, of bringing that into Gutenberg, but as of yet, we're essentially just using the core WordPress menus. So what we could do is we could interact with that section and add some more options in there. So you can see on the right-hand side here in the sidebar, we could add a color to the background of that section. We can also change the content width. So again, this then adheres to the rules that we have programmed into Gutenberg. You can also see that we can change it as a completely different color. And if we do that, you can see that automatically the header and the paragraph changes the color to contrast against what the background is. Again, adhering to the rules that we put in. So that stops editors being able to maybe manually select what color they think would work best on that. So it, like I say, it gives a much more consistent approach across content creation. So we could also put in, let's say, an image. And again, that's just a base block. But we could add, a nice bit of styling to it. So we can have these corners in, and you might also change the size of that. So we can predefine some sizes. And if we look at that on the front end, you see there that we're starting to pull together the layout of a page quite quickly. So then if we want to look at more complex blocks that we could build, let's look at putting in a hero. And again, this works in a similar way to the section that we talked about, where it's a group of singular components within one block. But this time we've got some predefined inputs in there. So we've got a heading, content, and the button block as well. And again, we've got options around this where we can change the color. You can see that the corresponding blocks within the group change to match that background color. So what I'm going to do with this one is put in a background image. I'll just drop in an image there. And I'll just start filling out some content. There we go, we've got a heading and a paragraph there. And then we've got the button here, so we can search for content throughout the website. So I'll put in this one to link to the About page. The text on that. Now, I spoke earlier about extending blocks. And this is a good example of what we've done here is with this button. Now, in previous versions of Gutenberg, it wasn't particularly easy to add, let's say, two buttons next to each other. So what we've done is we've took that button block and built a wrapper around that where we can add button settings. So I can then add a second button. and I can interact with that because that is essentially just a duplicate of the button block. And we'll just say this goes to our story. You can see also that we've got some styles here, so we can change the style of that button. If we preview that, you can see that on the front end of that, like I say, quite closely matches what's in the background, but without really adding any much functionality in the background to this. We can see that we've put together quite a nice layout here with some kind of predefined animations. So we've got some basic content here. So what I'm going to do is add another section in. And again, an example of something that we have took a Gutenberg block and then extended that to add our own functionality is what we're calling the column builder. So the column builder, as you might imagine, is going to put in some column rules within our grid structure. So we've asked in here how many columns our row requires. Let's say in this example 2. And then we've got set ratios that again were defined in the design system that we've integrated into Gutenberg. So we'll go with this ratio. And you can see there that we have 2 columns side by side. So in this one, let's put in an image. And to the side of it, we can start populating that with some other content. And put in some paragraphs. And again, we can add a button in there. And so this can go to the tech intentions page. And we can even change the style of that button again. We'll preview that page. And again, you can see how quick that is to make a layout. So this looks a little bit awkward that we've got this nice kind of curved header at the top with this straight section. So what we could do is rejig the order of these blocks around, which is a benefit of using the section model, because we can just get this and jump that down. So that now goes underneath the layout that we created there. And if we preview that page again, see that's starting to look a little bit nicer. It's probably worth mentioning at this point, so we've been working on this project maybe about 4 months. And at the time of doing this, one of the reasons we decided to extend the button block, for example, or make our own column block is the base Gutenberg blocks for those 2 options didn't quite have the functionality that we required to build the layouts that we were looking at. But actually, as of, like I said, last week when 5.3 was released, both of those features are now actually in core Gutenberg. So like I say, you could go away, install a fresh version of Gutenberg. And as I explained at the beginning, it's a constantly evolving software. So some of these kind of more advanced things that we've been building separate to Gutenberg are actually now in the core software. So I'm just going to add another section in. And we'll add a heading of latest insights. And then just the final one I want to touch on this is kind of creating more advanced blocks. So this, like I say, is kind of digging more into the React code base and building our own custom components. So for instance, that was something like the dynamic newsfeed card that we were looking at before. So if I search through our block editor and we bring in a dynamic card. So you can see on the right-hand side here, we've got various different options for this card. And we can select the post type from around the website and we'll bring in insight posts. So you can see that it's instantly populated that with posts from around the website. We can change the amount of posts that are shown. We could even turn this into a carousel to show more than 3 posts. And we could maybe change the display options. We might think, actually, we don't necessarily want to show the tags there, or we don't want to show the byline. And these are all defined as options that we can just turn on and off really quickly. Same again with button styles. So we can see that really, really quickly, we've started to build out quite a nice layout. So hopefully that's kind of give us a good grounding on how we can interact with Gutenberg and use it to build out, fairly complex layouts. And like I say, with Amnesty, with a framework like this that has their principles and their guidelines built into it, you can hopefully see how you could really quickly start building out a website at scale. So I said, I've touched a little bit on block development with something like the card feed or even the hero. But I wanted to just touch really quite briefly on some even more advanced block development that we've been doing. And really a good example of that type of work is what we've been doing with News Corp. So just to give you a bit of background on this project, News Corp across multiple publications are adopting Gutenberg as a digital publishing platform. So they are using Gutenberg as a base editor, but collaborating with agencies like ourselves or other WordPress VIP partners to develop a custom set of components built on top of WordPress that we're dubbing NewsPress. So this enables us to build Gutenberg extensions, plugins, components that can be shared across various platforms like the Times in the UK or the Wall Street Journal in the US. So the primary platform that we've been working on is the Times in the UK. So I've got a screenshot here of an article from the Times. And unlike Octopus, where when we're interacting with Gutenberg, it's focused on the layout and building layouts. This is kind of the opposite, where the layout is kind of quite rigid, predefined, and we're essentially using Gutenberg to speed up the process of creating content. So all of the tools that we're building is really to increase efficiency in building out a post just like this. So you can see that this is a football article. So we've got some different types of media embedded within that. Obviously, we've got images, but then we're also bringing in data from external sources. So we've got like match statistics, we've got league table, and we've got related articles at the bottom, which I can also touch on. So again, I'm going to jump over to the WordPress editor. Like I say, you can hopefully see this is quite different to the Octopus example. Let's say because this is less focused on creating layouts, the layout is quite predefined, and we're essentially just getting the journalist or the editor to just focus in on the content. So you probably see in a normal WordPress install, we have the heading at the top. The requirements for a website like this or the Wall Street Journal is an article wouldn't just have one headline. It might have multiple headlines that are displayed in various different places across the website. So we've got our headline here. We've also got an input for the stand first, which we can put in, which just sits below the title. But then we've also got this multi-title approach where we could change the title. Let's say we wanted to add some more SEO keywords. We can. Or we can add a short title. So again, they might be displayed in different places across the site. Let's say a sidebar where it wouldn't be able to fit in the full headline. It just wants to show the short title. And we've even, in some cases, added a word count into here. with a similar experience to Twitter, where it gives you a word count and an indicator if you're heading over that word count. So coming into the article, we can see we've got an image here, and you can see we've got the Getty image banner at the bottom. So again, in the spirit of really fast, efficient editorial workflow, we don't want someone to interact with that image, take it away from the article, maybe into Photoshop or something like that, and get rid of that banner, or even jumping into the WordPress image editor. So we're building a suite of inline tools, like let's say something where we can just crop the image. We can just really quickly get rid of that, save the crop, and it inserts a new image in there. And this is kind of part of a suite of image editing tools that we're doing. This is just a really easy example of something that we can do inline. We also saw in the screenshots there were various data sets that were brought into the article. Again, these are all hosted on third-party environments, but we don't want a journalist to leave this page, find an embed, bring it back in, and then embed it. We've integrated all of this data into WordPress, so we can just add in a block, and we've called this web components. So we'll go into that, and you can see all the different web components and data sets that we have in the Gutenberg editor. We can go into football, and let's say match stats, and then I can search for the game that this article is about. In this case, it's a Manchester United match report. So I'll just find the game. And you can see that the stats show there. We can bring that into the article. And we can do this for various different things. So let's say we wanted the league tables. And there we go. You know, within seconds, we've got the league table. And it's obviously visible in the editor as well. So you can start to see how you can quite quickly put an article together. And this could be various different things. For example, let's bring in a audio feed of a podcast player. We'll bring in an embed there. Do that, and you can see the podcast feed. And again, with Gutenberg being a visual editor, we can interact with that. We can play the podcast, and you can hear that directly in the editor.
Hello.
And then the final thing I want to touch on is related articles. So again, this could be quite an inefficient process of a journalist going away from this article, finding articles across the website that would relate to this. Really, we just want to bring that entire experience into Gutenberg. So we've got a search bar that we can interact with here. So let's type in Manchester United. And we're dealing with some legacy data here, but we've got 20 search results of articles. So we can quickly go through. So let's have a look at this one, and then an editor can quickly preview the article. They can even have a quick read of it, see if that's the right context for this related post. We can add that in. And also, as I've said about bringing external data sets in, we could even look at the analytics from a post. We can look through that, see if that post is performing well, add that in, and then these are the posts that will be displayed at the bottom of the article. So that kind of touches on a couple of things that we're doing editorially with Gutenberg, and hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight how powerful Gutenberg can be, and has the potential to massively improve efficiency with content creators. And yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into the power of the platform and how it can be a benefit to your organization. So, like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have of what you've seen. Also, the guys at Automatic might be able to chip in with any platform-specific questions. If you wanted to follow up with any questions on email, you could get me on email, johnny@bigbyte.net, or like I say, you can follow up with any of the guys at Automatic. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Johnny. We have a that I know that Scott has been getting to some of them as well. Also, if anyone wanted to ask a question live, you can raise your hand on the webinar, and then we'll be able to allow you to talk when I see your hand raised. Johnny, would you like me to call out some of the questions that have not been answered yet?
Yeah, I know Scott was answering some, so
yeah.
If you want to give me a little recap on what's been discussed as I've been going through, because obviously I wasn't paying attention to the questions.
No problem. So there is one, I'm just trying to go back to the start. I know some of them have been answered already. So Michael was asking, do you find that Gutenberg limits the abilities of designers and developers to create a custom page or a visual feature within the page? He was saying the custom HTML block has issues and limitations. So they found Gutenberg to be limiting when trying to implement something not built into our design system and custom blocks.
Right, okay. Did you?
I mean, my views on that, I know we don't really use the custom HTML block too much. We do a lot of customization, so we are doing a lot of custom blocks. As the Octopus project that Johnny's demoed, like a good chunk of that is like custom. So we're custom building the blocks to fit the design system, which takes a bit of time at the start, but then it's very flexible in the future. And it's, so it might take a little bit of time, like for engineering to build that up at the start, but it's very flexible, especially for a bigger project. To extend blocks in the future. So yeah, a lot of it's reusable. So yeah, I think it's just.
I see that Michael just raised his hand, so I've just allowed him to talk if he wants to add anything else to this question. Hi, Michael.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the main pain point that we experience here is in a pinch when executives ask us for something, we're trying to turn it around quickly, and it's not something built into our design system as a block or something, and we can, if it was just HTML, CSS, and we can just kind of build it quickly. Without Gutenberg, we can do it. Within Gutenberg, it can be challenging, particularly when we're using templated pages where the nav and footer are pre-built, and we're just trying to customize something between that. So it's really just, it's a matter of trying to turn something custom around quickly is where we have gotten tripped up. We've only been on live for about 3 months on WordPress VIP with Gutenberg and everything. So we're still fairly new to it, but that's been one of our pain points early on, setting aside all of the great things that we've been able to achieve with the Gutenberg blocks.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, in that situation, we have like a little, like a base block that we quickly fire up, that we can, it basically got like really bare bones attributes and then some markup in that we can just quickly kind of jump into. And then we'll just quickly maybe just chuck some HTML and CSS in there. And then you've got the flexibility of a block that you can put anywhere, but it might not be particularly dynamic at that time. It's just to illustrate a particular piece of functionality or something, maybe for a demo or something like that. So that might be useful, but I understand that it is a bit more, there's a bit more kind of bootstrap involved at the start, a bit more setup from traditional HTML. But I think far outweighs the flexibility and the power of Gutenberg, the block functionalities.
Sure. So the reason I was raising my hand was actually separate than that previous question. It was that seeing some of the blocks and the different implementations of Gutenberg and the design systems on this webinar was actually really helpful for me as I'm trying to plan the ongoing development of what blocks we need and how it could help us. Is there anywhere I can see a bunch of different examples of different companies and blocks that they have built for different purposes, just so that I can start getting ideas of different ways that I can have Gutenberg evolve for our needs?
Tessa, you might be able to answer that in kind of a more global approach. I know, I think Scott, just quickly looking through the comments, I think mentioned that we developed our own open source theme called Benenson, which you could maybe look at, which has a couple of things that I might have touched on today. In terms of kind of the wider open source community, I don't know if Tessa, you have any more thoughts on market.
Yeah, we're definitely, it's a goal of VIPs to share more examples of what our clients are doing with blocks in the near future. So look out, watch this space, I guess. But we do have, yeah, we have a few resources that we're going to be sharing, and we hope to sort of strengthen those. There are already a few, like if you look at WordCamp talks and things like that, you'll see some examples of those already as well. Feel free to reach out to us as well at WordPress VIP if we can send you a few links.
Awesome,
Yeah.
very much appreciate that, and appreciate this whole webinar. This has been helpful.
Thank you, Michael.
Great, thank you.
There are a few other, so Thomas, actually I'll just go to, there is a Q&A box as well that just has one question in it from Samuel, just asking if those are all default Gutenberg blocks.
So I'm assuming that we're talking about the octopus blocks there, and no, let's say a lot of them would be default blocks, but the more kind of like the single-use ones like heading, buttons, paragraphs, images. Whereas with that project, anything that we saw that kind of like enhances the layout, like the columns or the hero, would be more custom built. But like I said, even since we've started working on that project, the core WordPress has kind of caught up to where we were with that. So with 5.3, like the enhanced column builder is actually much improved now. Also the buttons block, we can do things that we've been doing there where we can add multiple buttons next to each other. So I'd encourage everyone to get the latest version of Gutenberg and start playing about with the blocks in there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Cores like come on a lot all the time. It's moving so fast. So like we started this project 3 months ago, and
Yeah.
already stuff's like in there that we've already been thinking about. So yeah, definitely it's moving on like really well, and I think it's a lot more user friendly now as well. Latest release is great. Like
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm conscious that there is quite a lot of questions here that I'd like to get to. Obviously, I don't know if we can kind of like get a copy of these and I can type out answers in kind of like the fullness of time, or should we just kind of keep going and picking one by one?
Yeah, I'll definitely give you a copy of them in case we miss any, but feel free to go in and pick out some to answer as well.
Yeah, again, I've put my email in there, so if you want to throw some questions at me over email, I can get back to you, or Scott can get back to you, or someone else from our team can get back to you as well. Yeah, is there any other ones you want to pick out in particular?
Let me have a look. There is one here about from Thomas about whether there are any pros or cons on using Gutenberg versus Elementor, if you have any experience with Elementor, or I guess other page building plugins as well.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, prior to this, I was more kind of using advanced custom fields to build sites. I think that was kind of a lot of the way it was going before Gutenberg. I know there was page builders out there that do similar things. I personally just never really got on particularly well with them. I do kind of find it much more comfortable to build out a layout with Gutenberg. And obviously it gives you that much more like visual editor than something like advanced custom fields, which obviously I was really used to using before.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any more experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've used a few of those page builders before. I think they were trying to fill a void, but I think Gutenberg kind of does that now anyway. Also, like from a developer point of view, there's such like a community behind the Gutenberg project. Everything's moving so fast. I just think it's really like the way to go. And obviously React based, so resource wise, there's just so much resources behind it. So yeah,
there is a question there actually about documentation for the block editor. being pretty poor now compared to the Codex. Tips for documentation in Gutenberg? I know we've definitely came up with the case that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because Gutenberg's moved along so fast. It's hard to keep the docs like up to date.
Yeah.
You know, especially some of like key concepts. But yeah, I think it's just a challenge, but it is getting better. It is getting better as well. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of times we've kind of dug into like GitHub files and kind of looked through different ways of other people, you know, other people have approached it, and
yeah, often, I mean, we've just well, personally, I'll jump into the core code and look for the filters, you know, but it's just experience. The more you do it, the more you pick up patterns and stuff.
So I don't know if that's a particularly great answer, but I think the documentation is getting better. It is getting better.
Would you suggest also like maybe trying to become part of the open source project, like tap into what the Gutenberg team is doing directly? If you have the resources to do that, would be a good way to kind of keep up to date with all of the latest development.
Absolutely. I mean, there's other things like the Making WordPress Slack channel, if everyone's in that. That's a really good resource, because obviously that's just a community of everyone that kind of cares about WordPress and is moving WordPress forwards. You know, that's probably quite a good place to go to if you have quite specific questions. Chances are there's going to be someone in that Slack community who, you know, will be able to answer that. So that's Making WordPress, the Slack channel.
And this is a kind of related question from Grant about whether there's if there's an issue that it's encountered while using Gutenberg, the best way to report it, if you find a bug, I guess.
I think generally GitHub
issues. Yeah, I think it's quite active on there.
Yeah.
There's probably likely somebody else has come across a similar thing. So yeah, I mean, whenever I've had issues, it's been looked at pretty quickly. Depending on things, if it's more of a crucial change, like a core change, it might take a bit more time. But yeah.
Yeah. There's a question there. Can I still choose to switch between visual and text editor on a post if I want to customize the HTML? Yeah, so you can do that. Yeah. I think there's limitations on what you'd be able to do technically with that. But yeah, you absolutely can switch to HTML view of any block.
There was one other question here that might be interesting, that if each of your blocks, it's from Benjamin. So if each of your blocks are modular, how many CSS files are you loading on the front end? Does each block get its own style sheet? Are you bundling style sheets for all blocks together when you deploy?
Yeah, so how we do it is we normally have SCSS file, like CSS file per block, and then we bundle them together. And for the editor, sometimes you need to make a few tweaks in the editor because we try and keep the editor looking as much like the front end as possible. But Gutenberg, because it's React, needs to add like extra markup here and there. So we have a separate editor file just for overrides, like little tweaks for blocks, just to make them maybe a bit like more like the front end in the dashboard. So that's how we approach it. You can do conditional loading, like if you split up your CSS files, but most pages we want the ability to have any block on any page, so we need all the styles anywhere. So that's how we approach it. We use like a BEM methodology for naming on blocks as well, so there's no conflicts, but it's probably getting a bit technical for this kind of talk. But if you have any, if you want to ask any questions on that, feel free to like email Johnny or me and I can get back to you on how we approach that.
Thanks. There's another question from Amir about how do you handle saved blocks by changing them in the future? I'm not sure, Amir, if you mean like the actual code blocks or reusable. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's, but I think probably reusable blocks. So.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so I was going to touch on reusable blocks actually, because for instance, like I didn't do it there, but there was, so we've got like that card one that I showed on the Octopus group one, there is a custom card as well. So that dynamic one, for instance, brings in like a newsfeed from a post type from around the website. But you can build up a custom card using like individual components. So if you kind of got a layout or you got a layout on the page that you were kind of happy with and you wanted to use somewhere else, you could use that. You could save that as a reusable block and then bring that in on another page. And there is a few drawbacks to that, which the
reusable blocks, we don't do too much just because the block's reusable in itself. So it's more like if you had two blocks, say a heading and a paragraph, and that made up like a little call to action, for example, you might group them together because it's just like a simple thing. I think if it was more complex kind of component, you'd actually make that a block in its own right, like a gallery or a carousel, and that would replace the need for like a reusable blocks kind of functionality. But it all depends on use case. Like for simple like core blocks that you want to group together, I think reusable blocks is good.
Yeah, there's a couple more Q&A coming in there. So yeah, if we have a blog and we change over Gutenberg, is the old content backwards compatible? Yes. Yeah. So I mean, obviously you can update to the new version of WordPress, and you can still have the classic editor installed in there, so you can switch between Gutenberg and the classic editor as well.
I just add on that, Johnny, as well, that so at WordPress VIP, we developed a plugin called Gutenberg Ramp, and that allows you to selectively enable Gutenberg on certain post types or just individual post IDs as well. So it gives you the opportunity to really just try out Gutenberg on just one post to start with, and then you can sort of roll it out across your website. So that's a good one to check out, is Gutenberg Ramp. And also that if you do switch to Gutenberg, that your old post, the old post that you wrote before, there's a classic editor block. So that content will automatically be converted into like a classic editor block and will retain all of the formatting.
Yeah. Benenson is open source, completely open source. I don't think there's any plans to have a premium version, but we probably do need to expand on Benenson, write some improvements for it.
Yeah, that's it. We've got a few blocks that to go in there that we've developed recently. You just need the time to just get them in there. So,
how do blocks look and work on mobile? Yeah, so that kind of like it falls into like the grid structure stuff that I was talking about, and obviously, you know, all of the stuff that we're kind of doing on that Gutenberg view that you're seeing is desktop, but the CSS kind of works in such a way that everything kind of responds on mobile anyway. We have done a little bit of work in creating a plugin that shows you the mobile view within the Gutenberg editor, which we're going to be expanding on. We just don't have that quite ready yet. But that's probably something that's quite useful as you're building out a page. It would just be a toggle that shows you how that page reacts to a tablet and mobile sizes.
There are a couple of questions about decoupled. So whether Gutenberg works well with a decoupled or a headless CMS using things such as Gatsby.
Yeah, you can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's something that we've done a couple of times on projects. Not something obviously that I've shown today. Obviously we didn't quite get into like the technicalities of the Times build, but yeah, certainly it's something that we've looked at in some client projects.
Yeah, I think there's a guide online that I followed for doing headless with Gutenberg. I could share it later. I haven't got it to hand now, but yeah, certainly some people are doing that. So
yeah. I think that might be all the Q&A ones.
Oh, Amir just clarified his question. We thought that it was about reusable blocks. What he meant is when you create a block with React and you save and publish it, and then maybe you need to change it and add something, and what happens with the data in WordPress. So I guess, yes.
So how this, for me, how this works is, if your block changes, you can add deprecations as attributes into the components. So what you do is, if any attributes have changed, your deprecations have your current attributes, and you put your new ones in your block. So yeah, you can put everything, all your old block in deprecations, and it'll like gracefully fall back. And it's quite helpful, the errors. So if you get any deprecations, it'll tell you, and you can just debug there. So yeah, you might. I mean, most of the time. Like we've maybe had a couple of deprecations, a few attributes here and there. But yeah, that offers the flexibility to offer. Basically, what all it does is it goes into the block and it'll just go back until it finds a suitable one. So you could have as many deprecations as you want. So hopefully that answers that question.
There's a question there about migrating with themes with advanced custom fields. That's quite a difficult one probably to answer right now, but I could definitely follow up on that because that's definitely something that we've encountered over the past couple of years working with Gutenberg, and kind of typically still encountering. So if I can follow up on that, or you could drop me an email on that one, I can write out a response to that.
Thank you. I think, oh, yep, I think that might be all of the questions. They were coming in a little fast there at the end, so hopefully we caught all of them. Thank you so much, Johnny and Scott, for joining, for running the webinar, and thank you everybody for attending. WordPress VIP, we help enterprises realize the power of the open web. So we handle all of the infrastructure, the performance, the security at scale. So our clients are free to focus on what matters to them. We're really excited to talk to you. Please get in touch with any questions about the webinar, any questions about WordPress VIP. We'd also love to hear any suggestions of topics that you'd like for future webinars. We're planning on running a lot more webinars, so please get in touch with anything that you would like to see covered. Thank you everybody for joining, and have a great one.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye.